Well, it has been said that life is a journey. You ever heard that? Sure. Well, I think we choose the path. I think that we choose the path. We face a lot of crossroads. We face a lot of intersections along the way. Sometimes we pause at those. Sometimes we pitch a tent. And sometimes we build a house, deciding which way we're going to go. But it ends up being this thing called life, a result of our individual and collective decisions and choices, doesn't it? This month we're going to be looking at the mystical influence on the path of spirituality in our series, Mystics of March. The Mystics of March. So what is a mystic? What is a mystic? Ernest Holmes, the founder of Centers for Spiritual Living and the author of The Science of Mind, tells us that a mystic is one who intuitively perceives truth and who, without conscious mental process, arrives at spiritual realization. Similar to what the ladies were singing, I am light. When there's a realization, that spiritual realization that I am light, that would be mystical, would it not? To experience yourself as just pure light, not skin and bones. Yeah, that would be a mystical experience. Our friends at Webster in the dictionary, folks, say someone who seeks by contemplation and self-surrender to obtain unity with or absorption into the deity or the absolute, or one who believes in the spiritual apprehension of truths that are beyond the intellect. So again, it's this idea of knowing truth without any reason, study, or research. Can you imagine? Not having to go to Google to find something out. It's just intuitively there. Just intuitively there, that knowing. That all sounds a little woo-woo this morning, doesn't it? Just a little woo-woo. But haven't we all had that aha moment of realization of something, some deeper understanding within us that's just a knowing? Yeah, we've all had that. We've all had that, be it in spirituality or some other thing that we're working on in our lives, that there's just, when you first get a certain type of mathematical problem solving, and you go, oh wow, okay, now I get it. It all just sort of falls into place. And that's the idea of what we're talking about here, but it's much bigger, obviously, than that. It's a bigger idea of the spiritual realization. So the mystic, it is said, also practices self-surrender. Practices self-surrender, letting go of that ego self, the one that wants to control everything out here, right, in our lives and all that, and embracing the spiritual mysteries. Just being okay with the spiritual mysteries, being okay with the unknown. I don't know the direction I'm to go, but I trust, and I'm okay in that unknowingness. So what sort of things are spiritual mysteries? The pyramids. Stonehenge. Did you see in the news just this week about Stonehenge? CNN's reporting that the Journal of Antiquity has revealed that the rocks were originally found in a prehistoric quarry about 150 miles away from the site. They're now whatever they're doing, carbon stamping, whatever, but they're determining that's where they're coming from. And that's about as far away as Flagstaff. And they moved these rocks. Anybody seen Stonehenge in person? 5,000 years ago. So then the conspiracy theories start, right? Oh, aliens. But they say, no, we found tools, which is evidence that it was all handled by humans. It's all handled by humans. So, mystery solved? Maybe, right? Well, maybe not. Maybe not. But what about the mystery of life itself, of creation? Haven't we all wondered about that? Haven't we all really whether you're just sitting on the park bench contemplating life or laying on your back looking at the clouds, haven't we all contemplated, where did I come from? Why am I here? And, evolution or God, creation story. What came first, the seed or the plant? The chicken or the egg? all of those things we really don't know, do we? We have our ideas, we have our beliefs around it, but we don't really know. Science today is telling us what? The Big Bang Theory, that's how it all started, right? And the Big Bang Theory, every time I hear that, my question is, what banged? What banged? What exploded? If there was nothing, what exploded? The theory says that the universe started with a small singularity. Now, I didn't know what that was, so I had to look it up. It says it's a point at which a given object is not defined or not well behaved. Know anybody like that? After it exploded, it then inflated over the next 13.8 billion years into the cosmos that we know today. No intelligence in that, right? So back to self-surrender. Embracing spiritual mysteries, practices of mystics and mysticism. The spiritual apprehension of knowledge inaccessible to the intellect, which may be attained through contemplation and self-surrender. These are all words that we see about the idea of what is this mystical experience, mysticism. In my life, I've come to recognize surrender as one of the most empowering spiritual tools that I have, that I can use, that has become a part of my life, is surrendering my need to control and be attached to things, and to just surrender into the oneness, into the wholeness. Keith's laughing. I'll have to talk to him afterwards about that. I didn't say I was good at it. But surrendering into something greater. Surrendering into something greater. Letting go. When things come at us, when things happen in our lives, letting go and surrendering. Many of all the 12-step programs have that as a core of their training and their teaching, don't they? Surrender to your something greater than we are. Surrender to your higher power, or whatever that might be. Tammy Gordon and I had a long conversation about that several months ago, about what some people choose as their higher power to surrender to, because they have such a difficult relationship with spirit in their lives that they can't say they surrender to God, they surrender to something else. But it's whatever it is, it's the idea of surrender. And we have in our society the idea that surrender simply means giving up or failure. And that's not in the spiritual realm what we're talking about. We're talking about surrendering into that which we already are, our divine nature. Our meditation this morning talked about divine nature. Holmes' reading talked about divine nature. It is our nature to be in the oneness and the wholeness. But we can choose not to be, can't we? We can choose to be separate because we are those wonderful beings of choice. British philosopher Alan Watts suggests that we not cling to anything. He suggests we learn to swim, and I thought that was a wonderful analogy. He says swimming is kind of a relaxed attitude to the water. You don't fight it. You don't cling to it to keep yourself afloat. If you've ever seen someone trying to swim, they're trying to hold on to the water, and you can't, right? You can't hold on to the water. And as long as we're fighting it, trying to control it, we're not using its nature and our own nature of our bodies to float and use that buoyancy. So surrendering to the water, we can work with it and use that natural buoyancy of the water to float, then begin to swim and propel ourselves forward. So what have you surrendered in your life? What have you surrendered in your life? You know, like Keith was laughing. Everything I've ever let go of had claw marks in it. Seriously, though, what kinds of things do we surrender in our lives? What kind of things do we surrender? You know, coming up this Wednesday is Ash Wednesday, and it's the beginning of Lent. In our Christian traditions, many will sacrifice or surrender something for the next 40 days. It's from March 6th until April 21st, which is Easter. And that's that 40-day period of giving up something for Lent. You may have heard that phraseology. But we don't practice those Orthodox traditions here. And if you were going to give up something, though, what might you give up? Particular food? A habit? A behavior? Or maybe something else? Judgment, fear, separation. What might you give up, or what might you begin? If we want to go to the affirmative side of it rather than giving up, what might you affirm for the next 40 days? We have our gratitude journals still hanging around here. I think there's some more. If there's not, I've got them upstairs. We could do 40 days of gratitude again along this time of Lent, of release. And just simply step into gratitude for 40 days. Step into being kind for 40 days, focusing ourselves on being kind to at least one person for 40 days. So lots of opportunity for practicing that. So this study of mystics is about union. That's kind of the common thread that we see in all of the research and data and stuff that comes out of people who profess to be mystics, is that they return with a description of unity, of union, of recognizing this oneness and this wholeness that we teach about, which is where those ideas have come from in our spirituality, is from the mystical side, and the recognition that as we are all one, that they in those moments immerse and blend with that in that divine union. Ernest Holmes tells us that true mystics have not denied the reality of individuality. In other words, they don't give up their individual expression of the divine and their individual human expression. That's not what they're giving up at all. They have all agreed that the soul is on the pathway of experience of discovery. It's on the pathway of discovery, on the way to that higher understanding. They have told us of the marvelous relationship which exists between God and man, of a close union which cannot be broken. The oneness, the wholeness. I loved this picture when I came across it in preparing my talk. It's a quote from Meister Eckhart, who was a 12th century mystic. And he says, "God is home. It is we who have gone for a walk. It is we who have gone for a walk." And part of that walkabout on the journey of life is the discovery of our relationship with God and these mysteries, and being open to that. So I have a question for us today. Do you think that there is a difference in a belief in God and an experience of God? Belief in God or experience of God? For me, it seems like believing in God is something that is more intellectual. It's something that's taught. We read, we study, we go to church, we form beliefs, we hear different ideas, and we make our decisions. Oh yeah, I believe in God, and I believe in this kind of God. I believe that God is within. Oh no, I believe in God that's in heaven with St. Peter and the pearly gates and the clouds and the angels. Okay? So or I believe in Krishna, or I believe in some of the other deities that are there. Brahma. So we make some intellectual sort of decisions around that, what we believe. But an experience of God is something, I think, completely different. It's transformative. It's much like Paul, or Saul at the time, on the road to Damascus, if you remember that story. He was a tax collector and he was persecuting the Christians. This is after Jesus' crucifixion. And he was blinded by a flash of light. And he heard a booming voice, "Why are you persecuting me?" And he goes, "Who is this?" He said, "It's Jesus. Stop persecuting me." And he's like, "Let me think about that." So when he opened his eyes, he couldn't see. And now suddenly he's blind for 3 days. So Saul, who became Paul, who then carried the Christian teaching forward, had that transformative experience of God on the road to Damascus, which transformed him. But it's interesting, he had a 3-day blindness in the darkness just much like the Jesus story of the crucifixion, where he was in the dark in the cave for 3 days, right? In the tomb for 3 days. So it's an interesting analogy. It's an interesting story to look at. But it is an example of an experience of God as opposed to simply a belief in God. Simply a belief in God. And one of the things that I really love about our Science of Mind teaching, and you hear me say it often, is its applicability, that we can apply it in our lives. And so we teach practices of meditation, practices of contemplation, to help us to heighten our awareness of the divine in our lives, to heighten that experience and that receptivity to that divine relationship that we talked about last month. We talked about God as love. These practices help to open us up to that partnership. One of the resource materials I was looking at described a story of a woman who had come out of the Christian tradition who was not feeling connected in her spirituality. And so she was searching. And one day she's in her garden and she's cutting some flowers for the table. And suddenly she had a mystical experience with those flowers, that they became more alive to her. They became illuminated in some way, and the colors were much more vibrant, and everything sort of went into three-dimensional viewing in a deeper way with her. And she had that knowing, that oneness, once again, that she was one with those flowers, she was one with all around her, she was one in the universe. And she had that mystical experience through just clipping flowers in her garden. And you may have had that in looking in the eyes of a child, or the touch of a child's hand, or gazing out over the Grand Canyon, our beautiful Grand Canyon here. There are many, many ways to have these experiences. It's not just, and frequently it's not even, sitting on a meditation cushion. But that's plowing the field, so to speak. That's creating the fertile field for us to recognize the presence of the divine, the presence in those moments. Because otherwise we might be clipping those flowers and feel something but not really feel it and be aware of it. Not really be aware of it. Rudolf Otto wrote a book in 1923 called The Idea of the Holy. And in it he coined a term, numinous. And he said a numinous experience is a unique quality of the encounter with the sacred. And I love that word. It's almost like illuminate, but it's numinous, and there's almost a mystical quality about that. And I think that's what we're talking about. Mystical experiences are recognizing the sacred. Recognizing the sacred. That song that Reverend Glenn used to sing, everything is holy now. Everything is holy now. And I think that's a perspective and an attitude of looking at life. And it's that conversion from what we think we know about God to what we experience of the holy, what we experience of it. So there have been mystics of all ages. We go back as far as ancient Greeks. Plato is said to have been a mystic, Pythagoras. The Bible stories, Moses, Jesus, David. Eastern tradition, Buddha. Would you think Buddha was a mystic? Probably. And the Catholic tradition, Christian, New Age, and New Thought. Some suggest Ernest Holmes may have been a mystic. And if you read some of his writings, particularly his later writings, you may agree. We know he did have a mystical experience in 1959 on February the 12th. He was participating in the dedication of our Whittier Church in California. And as he was there, he said to the congregation, I see you uniting in one great hymn of praise, one great union of effort, one crescendo of song. And he paused for 12 seconds, just looking out at the audience. And then he said, I see it. And he paused again for another 10 seconds or so. And he said, the veil is thin between. And he paused again. I see it, and I shall speak no more. And he took his seat. He went on to described the experience to Reverend George Bendall that was living with them at the time, and to his brother Fenwick Holmes. And he asked both of them not to tell anybody because he said, they'll think I'm crazy. Don't tell anybody. They'll think I'm absolutely nuts. So Fenwick honored that, and Fenwick doesn't mention it anywhere in his writings about his brother. However, George, after Ernest's passing, did write about this experience. And there's a book out called The Holmes Papers. And in that, it's described in detail, the entire script, and then some after conversations that he and George had. And that's how we know about it today. And there's also a recording of it. 1959, Whittier, for whatever reason, had a recording of that. And that's something that we do have available to us here to listen to if you've got an interest. So that's a fun thing to do. So what's your relationship with Spirit? What's your relationship with Spirit? Is it a belief in God? Or do you have an experience of God? The sacred, the numinous, beyond the intellectual knowledge, to experience. You know, it's the idea, again, of I can read all about, or I can watch the videos about how to ride a bicycle or snow ski or any of that stuff, but until I actually do it, I haven't had the experience of it, have I? Until I actually do it, I haven't had the experience. Sarah McLean, she's the meditation teacher from Sedona, who's actually now in California. She moved over there. But she's got an article on modern mystics, and she says, faith and patience are required on this path. A mystic surrenders without a plan for where the path might lead or how long it might take. Can you imagine starting that journey? The evolution of one's awakening requires purification in practice. Self-knowledge and divine communion is the ultimate goal. Imagine starting every meditation with that. My ultimate goal is divine communication. Communication is two ways, right? My goal is divine communication. So I believe that we're all called to try to find meaning in our lives. I believe that we're all called to that. We've got, as Ernest said in that original reading this morning, we've got that hunger. We've got that desire within us to explore, to know more, to learn more, to at least occasionally question, to allow that movement of Spirit within us. Some answer the call, and some do not. I believe that we all search in our own ways, though. And it may be in a yoga studio. It may be in deep study and exploration and working with gurus and so forth. It may be in business. It may be in ministry of some sort. But we all search in our own ways. And the way of the mystic is to differentiate in that belief and the experience. To be on that path and look for and welcome the experience of the holy. So I want to take a look at our practicing the presence this week and see how we might actually be able to be more welcoming to this sacred. The first is intuitively perceive the truth. Are you a mystic? Are you a mystic? I think we all are to a certain degree because we're all divine beings, right? We're all divine beings. The mystic or the numinous experience is sacred. And as Holmes said, that veil is thin when there is a mystic experience. The veil is thin. We're not as connected in the material form as we are in the actual spiritual realm. Those who do deep meditation, you know what we're talking about there, that there is an opening that occurs within us when we go into the deep meditation. The connection. We feel the source. And it's been the standard description of all mystics has been that idea of unity. The idea of knowing that I am one with the universe. Knowing that I am part of that, the stardust that Degrassi Tyson talks about. That we are all part of that. So this week, be aware, attentive, and allowing to everything that's sacred in your life. I think you'll be surprised at what comes up that is sacred, that is holy. Because if it's all spirit, it's all holy, right? Number 2 is self-surrender, letting go of the me for the I am. Letting go of the me for the I am. According to Deepak Chopra, he tells us that self-surrender or spiritual surrender is to stop struggling against what is, let go of the smallness of life, and fully embrace its totality. It's an empowering practice to simply let go. Feels like deep relaxation, not only in the body, the mind, but also the soul. To let go. I no longer have to be the universal police. I will frequently visualize falling backwards into that pool of water and just allowing the buoyancy of the water to support me. There's a relaxation, there's a letting go in that visualization for me. As Watts told us, we don't fight the water to stay afloat in it, we surrender to it. And the same is true with spirit. And when our ego and material minds want to fight and control, spirit is already supporting us if we just let go and allow. So this week, develop an affirmation of trust and faith that there is a divine force taking care of everything in your life in perfect order. What if we could accept that? What if we could really believe that? Another perspective to think about when things are happening around that letting go thing. I called this in. My soul called this in. What is here for me? What is here for me? Right? That opens us up to greater understanding to our own evolutionary process. My soul called this in. What is mine to learn in this? Where am I to grow through this? Number 3, contemplation and union with the divine. I can't encourage you enough to spend time in the silence. You're probably tired of hearing it. But, it works. For those of you that do your daily spiritual practices, you spend time in the stillness, you spend time in the silence, you know it works. Because we don't keep doing it if it doesn't work. But it does work, so I encourage you to do that. God is that still small voice, and it's most easily heard when we're quiet. Sometimes when I enter meditation, I don't know about you, but the chatter gets going. And going, and going, and going, and going. It's like, hello already, be still. So I will begin to have that conversation with myself. Be still. This is not your time to talk. This is God's time to talk. It's your time to listen. Be still, be still, be still. Until it begins to let go. Begins to let go, and I can get into that silence. I can get into that stillness. I can get into that listening, receptive place of spirit. So this week, approach your quiet time with the intention of union with the divine. Of union with the divine. And see if your mind will cooperate with that also. So we're delving into the mystics in March. This is just the overview and a little bit about Ernest Holmes and the sacred and the holy. But the next few weeks we're going to look at some specific beings on our planet that have been proclaimed as mystical. Their mystical teachings and so forth. So we're going to do some exploration there. But I want to close this today with a quote from philosopher Aldous Huxley, who says, if a man would travel far along the mystic road, he must learn to desire God intensely, but in stillness, passively, and yet with all of his heart and mind and strength. So I invite you this week to be attentive to the sacred in your life, in the little ways and in the large ways. Those numinous experiences that may just show up for you. They're always available. And they're always elusive. So let's practice now as we move into an affirmative prayer this morning. I believe in God and nothing else. There's not God and something. There's just the divine. There's just this high Holy Spirit, the sacred, the loving presence. It is the power that holds planets and creates universes. It is the flower that created the rose. It is the fragrance of the rose. And all of it is here now in this room, right now, right here, surrounding each of us, pressing against each of us, in, through, and as us, as an expression of it. We are unique manifestations of the divine. Brothers and sisters to that rose. All of creation. Each other. Our planet, our environment, all of it. And as I recognize that, I speak my word this morning for and about each of us as we recognize and acknowledge our own oneness in the holy, in the sacred, and recognize that all around us, everything we touch, everything we see, every breath we take is sacred and holy, for it is all the divine. We do, in fact, stand on holy ground. And I know this day for anyone that has anything on their heart that they are seeking prayer around, that as they lift that into their awareness, that we know it is lifted into the healing consciousness of this prayer, into the divine right action of mind, that whatever needs to be revealed is revealed, that clarity is crystal clear in this moment, that abundance flows to any area that it may not appear to be now, and that health, life, and joy are all abundantly ours now. And so it is with great gratitude and a joy-filled heart that I release this into the activity of the law, that we know that it is done. It is already made manifest. We couldn't have the idea. We couldn't speak the words if it was not already a divine idea in the mind of God. So we know it is in the mind, and we are simply awaiting it in form. We affirm this truth and this acceptance in this moment by saying, and so it is.